The moment is here, you can stop your search. It's Comics by Perch.
Hey everybody, this is Perch. Marvel and DC putting out runs that matter. To have a run that matters, you need to actually have, a lot of comics in that run. What is a run? Again, I generally think a good comic run is minimal 12 issues, and really that's very minimal. A good solid run is going to be 24 at least, and then you're getting into kind of 36, 48. A good solid run, something that would fill an omnibus. But you don't have a lot of comics that even go that long with, at all, let alone with a single creator. So that's the first problem. But this mail says, I wish Marvel and DC would put out runs that actually matter. Yeah, me too, brother. It says, hey, Perch, I have been mulling the history of Spider-Man and Captain America, among other characters, after finishing up the J.M. DeMatteis run on Cap. Solid stuff, including the death of the Red Skull in his original body, and some wonderful characterization of Baron Zemo. It felt like it mattered when I read it, even though the events most likely haven't ever been referenced in any substantial manner in years. That's kind of a shame, but yeah, you are right. Same thing with the recent Spider-Man: The Lost Hunt, also by DeMatteis, even though the events of which don't even matter because in the current continuity, because the emotional tie between Peter and MJ is shattered for the moment. Because let's be honest, the Zeb Wells run on Spider-Man isn't going to matter in 5 years because everything it does is going to be more or less undone. I'm still pissed and waiting for one more day to be undone, but I'm trying to be optimistic here. I got into reading comics in 2015 and started out with Peter running a company. I was indifferent to it even then because 11-year-old me just wanted to see some villains. Then Peter Inc. collapsed like 2 years later, and now nobody references it. Like it never, ever happened. Comics should build upon what came before and not just to some easily undoable storylines that are just the empty calories of comics. That's a good way of saying it. Hydra Cap was a big deal for a year or so, and that was easily undone after Event. The Krakoa era of the X-Men literally had a reset button available with Moira. Few of these easily undone storylines are going to be reread by the public at large because none of them really move the world forward. Why would future generations bother to read the Zeb Wells run when Kraven's Last Hunt is out there? Hell, the R-rated Kraven movie that comes out in October is going to be more memorable in the long run than the Zeb Wells one. The Zeb Wells run sells well now, but in the long run, it won't be remembered well enough to be kept in print. The shock value only helps spark short-run sales. It'll fade into the long run, leaving only the quality of storytelling as the measure of sales in the end. All right, that's not really a question. It's more of a statement. But, I think that's... Look, there's a bunch of factors here, in terms of how comics are currently produced. We have shorter runs. We have creators who are signed on for far fewer titles than they used to be. So, now a creator is lucky to get 12 issues. And so in that time, they only have a short little storytelling burst, and they're really not coming on to do anything long-term or substantial. It's like a slice in the life of Peter Parker. And so they tell a story, and they don't really, there's very little they can do. It's why a lot of comics runs now have like little Easter eggs, like, is the villain really dead? Who knows? I mean, frankly, who cares? That if this villain shows up again in the future, what's going to happen is they're not even going to kind of reference that the villain appeared to be dead in an earlier comic. Is the villain just going to wander into the picture again? I saw that, Ultron is left in a really weird state right now, kind of owning territory in the U.S. and being merged with Hank Pym, and like he owns a country, kind of, or does he? Does anybody know? Like, what's Ultron doing now? I feel like in a couple issues, the Avengers, Ultron's just going to kind of wander into the scene and be like, I'm here to make robots out of people. And you're like, oh, fuck. Okay, what happened to your country? It is Blade still the sheriff of Vampire Land in Russia? Is that still, that's currently a thing, but we have Brian Edward Hill doing a new Blade series. Is it going to be set as him being a sheriff in Russia? Who knows? The part that's troublesome is in a lot of the cases, these storylines, the things that are being tossed out, they're not even being resolved. They just kind of sit there, and then it's like, oh, fuck it. Now on to the next thing. That's where it's at. Comics are in a bizarre place where they're just kind of putting out greatest hits type stories, except many of them won't ever be hits. And the idea of kind of longevity, big runs, things like that, that's not anybody's concern, or it's not factoring into anything right now. I mean, you have to admire Jason Aaron trying to do this long epic run between what he did with Thor leading into the Avengers. I thought his Avengers run was dreadful. I mean, it felt like, fuck it, let's toss every drunk idea I ever had at the wall and see what happens. But I do admire his commitment to bringing stories and themes and everything else that threaded through the original Thor, to the Jane Foster run, to War of the Realms, to the Avengers. I mean, there was at least some longer running narrative there, but that's few and far between. There's just very little that actually gets accomplished in comics that matters. I mean, for that matter, hopefully what Phil Kennedy Johnson is doing the Hulk, right? Well, I mean, I'm hoping that on some level they reference some of the things that went on in Immortal Hulk. That title actually did quite well and sold well and was critically acclaimed, and it wasn't just the body horror aspect of it. There are parts of that storyline that seemed to actually matter in terms of the Hulk and kind of the mythology of the character and all the rest, whether you liked it or not. There was I mean, a lot of people did. But then we went right into Space Hulk with, a helmet on and going, and, like, they turned the page on that Immortal Hulk run immediately. And we're like, fuck it, moving on. Like, right away. And so, the idea of, like, when will we get long runs going in comic books? Well, I mean, first off, you've got to give writers the time. And then second, we've got to give them the direction to say, hey, instead of just playing, a cover version of a greatest hit song, just let's try and make a hit. But this is maybe the most the toughest part about comics right now is I don't think anybody's really tasked or being pushed to make a hit. The editors are talking to writers like, let's do a crazy pitch and do it for a couple issues and see what happens. But has any writer kind of been contacted by an editor saying, hey, you know what? Let's do something where if you're on the title for 5 years, what would that look like? Like, don't give me just a short-term kind of crazy, out-of-the-box, this will get people's attention idea. Give me something huge. Give me something that actually, can be a big, epic storyline. Because right now it doesn't feel, frankly, that anyone's shooting for that. It feels like, I think empty calories. It's the junk food of comics. And so when you look at it, it's hard to blame the writers for all of it. I mean, you do wish there was better stories and everything else, but again, if the writer's being hired for 3 to 6 issues and being told, just give me a crazy idea and we'll see what happens, none of that is going to lend itself to a run. That's not even the job anybody's being tasked with. So I think that the writers and the editors and the publishers have to at least have a mission to say, you know what, we are pretty sure we're going to be publishing Captain America for the next 5 years. So how about we do something like truly, truly substantial for 5 years, and we invest in a writer, and we give them time, and we really go for it. We try and build up an omnibus, a good run, something to be referenced for years, as opposed to something that can get a headline, out of IGN on a slow news day for, a few weeks. I mean, look, here, I'll put it to you this way. And I know this has been talked to death, but the John Kent and Damian Wayne Super Stunts dynamic, where you got to see two heroes kind of grow together and be friends and probably have a falling out and then become friends again and kind of rally that, and all that kind of stuff. That storytelling, that long run of these two kind of young superheroes finding themselves and finding a friendship and and becoming superheroes. There was a lot of money in that run, a run that actually put those ideas out on the table. There was a ton of money there. And instead, the hot shot of like, let's age up John Kent. Oh, fuck it, he's old now. And then, he's gay now. What good was that? It got headlines. John Kent's older. John Kent's gay. It got the writer in the second case on CNN to talk about making Superman gay. But what good did it do? In long term, again, what good did any of this do? You took away the ability to have a run. Now, maybe you can say, all right, well, we're going to have a run with older John Kent. You can do that. Maybe we're going to have a run, that really explores the sexuality. You could do that too. But do you notice that even in the current Tom Taylor, John Kent run, where he's going to the, these other planets, they're not tackling that he's gay. Like if you pick up the second issue or some of this stuff, you don't even know he's gay. They're not referencing it at all. They're just doing a story. But the thing that strikes me as the big gotcha in this new Tom Taylor, John Kent run is John Kent is, he's with the Injustice Superman. What will happen there? I don't know. It's a big deal. He's going to have to meet a version of Superman that's mean and a fascist. And okay, that gets headlines because people know the storyline. People know this Injustice storyline, but this is something that will catch people's attention for a couple months. The idea of John Kent going to the multiverse and meeting the Injustice Superman is not something that's going to be remembered 25 years from now, but a long storyline where he bonds and gets a friendship with Damian Wayne would have been. Is anybody going to remember the whole storyline and kind of background behind, John Kent being aged up in the Bendis run? Hey, remember when Bendis had that Leviathan, secret organization? Remember that? Does it matter? Does the Leviathan secret organization and stuff he was doing Checkmate and everything? Does anyone care? Is anyone thinking about this? Is anybody writing stories about it? Is it kind of set a new cornerstone in the DC mythology? No. People have forgotten it. And that was a couple of years ago, like 2 years ago. Hey, do you remember all the big things that Bendis did with the Legion of Superheroes? Remember that? Again, that was 2 years ago. I think it was 1 year ago that we had Justice League versus the Legion of Superheroes. Was that supposed to be a big deal? The problem is, in many cases, the writers aren't given long runs, and the storytelling has turned to hot-shotting or kind of big gimmick matches. In this instance, comics could learn a lot from pro wrestling to understand that, you can't just rush to a match. You actually have to, feed out the storylines, because when you do that, you sell tickets to the events. But if you just kind of, slam it through, you may get a headline here or there, but you lose out on a lot of money. This whole Roman Reigns storyline they have going on has been going on forever. What is he held that he's been the champion for like 3 years now, or some crazy amount of time? I mean, cool, but it's kind of crazy to me that pro wrestling has better long-term storyline thinking than comic books right now in 2023. But it certainly does seem to. Anyway, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Like and subscribe, of course, and thanks for listening.